Welcome to the darkest corners of your imagination, where fear knows no boundaries. This is Mr. Night Scare's story, the home of spine-chilling tales that will haunt your dreams. Here, the night comes alive with stories of unspeakable terror, from cursed forests to haunted houses, from lurking shadows to untold urban legends. We bring you nightmares you'll never wake up from. Are you brave enough to face what lies ahead? Once you enter, there's no turning back. Subscribe now, if you dare. And remember, every story you hear here might just be true. Mr. Night Scare's story, where fear becomes reality. Story number 1. Shadows of Blackthorn Manor. Tucked deep within the Appalachian woods of West Virginia, hidden from the world by gnarled trees and overgrown trails, stood Blackthorn Manor. Its once proud Victorian architecture now sagged under the weight of time and tragedy. Locals avoided the house, muttering tales of disappearances, mysterious lights, and sinister screams that pierced the night. They claimed it was cursed, a predator lying in wait. Yet, for decades, the stories remained just that, stories, until the night 5 friends decided to test their bravery. The chilly October air was alive with the spirit of Halloween as Amy, Kyle, Sarah, Jake, and Mia huddled together in the back of Kyle's truck. The group had grown up hearing tales about Blackthorn Manor, but none of them had ever dared approach it. Tonight, that would change. "I bet you guys can't stay there till sunrise," Kyle challenged, his tone dripping with mockery. "You're on," Jake said without hesitation. The others exchanged nervous glances but eventually nodded. The prize was simple. Everyone would chip in $500. Those who stayed until dawn would split the pot. It wasn't just about the money, it was about pride. With flashlights, cameras, and a Ouija board in hand, they approached the decrepit mansion, unaware of the horrors awaiting them. The house loomed over them, its broken windows like empty eye sockets. The door creaked open on its own as they stepped inside. "Welcome to hell," Jake joked, but his voice wavered. Chapter 2. The Diary of Eleanor Blackthorn. The inside of the manor was worse than the outside. Dust blanketed everything. Cobwebs draped over the once grand staircase. The air was thick, damp, and suffocating. The house seemed alive, groaning and creaking with each step they took. In the upstairs master bedroom, Amy found a dusty diary on a nightstand. The name, Eleanor Blackthorn, was engraved on the cover. She flipped through its pages, reading aloud. "The shadows whisper my name. They demand blood. They demand obedience. The house will never let us leave." "What the hell does that mean?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, the bedroom door slammed shut. Their flashlights flickered, and a low, guttural moan echoed through the room. "That's it. I'm out," Mia said, heading for the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked from the outside. Kyle laughed nervously, probably just old wood settling. "Don't freak out," but deep down they all felt it. The house was watching them. As they explored further, the group heard faint whispers coming from the walls. At first, they thought it was the wind, but the whispers grew louder, clearer. "Help us," the voices cried. "Set us free." In the dining room, the chandelier suddenly swung violently, crashing to the table below. A faint outline of a woman appeared in the corner. Her hollow eyes stared at them, and her lips twisted into a sinister smile before she vanished. "Did you see that?" Sarah gasped, clutching Jake's arm. "No one's going to believe this," Jake muttered, pointing his camera at the spot where the figure had stood. The footage would later show nothing but static. Driven by both fear and curiosity, they descended into the basement, where the air grew colder with every step. The room was a macabre collection of relics, animal bones, jars of preserved organs, and blood-stained symbols carved into the walls. In the center of the room stood an ornate crate bound by chains. A soft, childlike sobbing emanated from within. "We have to open it," Jake said, grabbing a crowbar. "Are you insane?" Mia hissed. "What if whatever's in there isn't human?" But Jake ignored her protests. With a loud crack, he pried the lid open. Inside was the skeletal remains of a child, clutching a rusted music box. As Jake lifted the box, it began to play a haunting melody. The room grew deathly silent. Then, the shadows in the corners of the room began to move, coalescing into the figure of a woman, Eleanor Blackthorne. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally. The walls of the basement seemed to close in, trapping them. Eleanor's figure grew taller, her skeletal hands stretching toward the group. Jake screamed as the shadows engulfed him, dragging him into the floor. "Run!" Kyle shouted, grabbing Mia's hand. They fled up the stairs, only to find the front door bricked over. Amy stared into a mirror hanging in the hallway. Her reflection didn't match her movements. Instead, it grinned maliciously before shattering. One by one, the house turned on them. Sarah disappeared into a room that locked behind her, her screams echoing down the hall. Kyle and Mia were separated in the chaos. Mia found herself back in the master bedroom, clutching Eleanor's diary. She flipped to the final page, which detailed a ritual to break the curse. She needed Eleanor's music box and a Blackthorne family heirloom, which she found in a hidden compartment in the room. Kyle burst in, his clothes torn and face pale. "We have to end this," he shouted. Together, they performed the ritual, reciting the incantation as the house trembled violently. The walls bled, and the air filled with screams. Eleanor appeared one last time, her face contorted with rage. "You think you can escape?" she snarled. "The house always wins." But as the ritual completed, the shadows dissipated, and Eleanor let out a bone-chilling scream before vanishing. At sunrise, Mia and Kyle stumbled out of the house, battered and traumatized. Blackthorne Manor stood silent behind them, its windows dark and uninviting. Years later, the house was still there, its curse lying dormant. Local teens whispered about the survivors who never spoke of what they saw inside. But the house was patient, waiting for the next group of fools to cross its threshold. Story number 2. The Hollow Woods Lodge. Deep in the dense, uncharted forests of Oregon lies Hollow Woods Lodge, a crumbling hotel built in the 1930s as a retreat for the wealthy. It thrived for a few years before mysteriously shutting down after a string of gruesome disappearances. Over the years, rumors of hauntings, strange lights, and violent apparitions turned the lodge into a local legend. No one dared to venture into the Hollow Woods, except those foolish enough to seek out the truth. A team of 4 amateur filmmakers, Samantha, the director, Chris, the cameraman, Rachel, the sound engineer, and Ben, the skeptic, set out to make a documentary about the lodge. Samantha had spent months researching its dark history, compiling stories of guests vanishing without a trace and workers going insane. "This place will make us famous," Samantha said as they drove into the forest. "We'll be the first to capture real evidence." As they approached the lodge, the dirt road became narrower, swallowed by towering trees. The air grew colder, and the forest fell unnaturally silent. When they finally reached the lodge, its decaying facade loomed over them like a predator waiting to strike. "This is it," Samantha whispered, both excited and uneasy. Inside, the lodge was a time capsule of its opulent past. Faded velvet drapes, broken chandeliers, and tarnished brass fixtures. Dust coated every surface, and the smell of rot was overwhelming. They set up their equipment in the grand lobby. Samantha began narrating. Hollow Woods Lodge was built in 1932 by millionaire Arthur Greaves, who wanted to create a luxurious escape for the elite. But just 10 years later, the lodge was abandoned after a series of inexplicable tragedies. Guests disappeared, staff were found mutilated, and some claimed Arthur himself went mad, performing occult rituals in the basement to save the lodge. Rachel shivered. "What kind of rituals?" Samantha shrugged. "No one knows. The records were lost, and the survivors refused to talk." As night fell, the team began exploring the lodge. They discovered strange carvings on the walls, symbols that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. In the dining hall, the long table was still set with silverware, though the plates were cracked and covered in dust. Chris set up a camera near the fireplace. "We'll catch something for sure," he said. At midnight, strange things began to happen. Rachel heard faint footsteps upstairs, But when they investigated, they found nothing. Samantha's flashlight flickered as they explored the west wing, and Chris swore he saw a shadow dart across the hallway. In one of the guest rooms, they found an old journal belonging to Arthur Greaves. The final entry read, "They demand more. The lodge is alive. I am its servant now." The next day, they discovered a hidden door behind the reception desk. It led to a staircase descending into darkness. Against Ben's protests, the group decided to explore. The basement was a labyrinth of stone corridors. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, glowing faintly in the dim light. They found what appeared to be an altar in the center of the room, surrounded by decayed animal bones. Samantha examined the altar closely. This must be where Arthur performed his rituals. As she spoke, the air grew heavy, and an ear-piercing scream echoed through the basement. The candles they'd brought flickered violently before going out. "What was that?" Rachel whispered, clutching Ben's arm. "We need to leave," Ben said firmly, but Samantha refused. "This is what we came for. We're so close." That night, the lodge came alive. Doors slammed shut on their own. Shadows moved without light. Whispers filled the air, growing louder and more aggressive. Rachel disappeared first. One moment, she was adjusting a microphone in the dining hall. The next, she was gone. The group found her equipment abandoned, her headphones lying in a pool of blood. "We're leaving now," Ben said, dragging Samantha and Chris toward the exit. But the front door was gone, replaced by a solid wall of rotting wood. Chris checked the footage on his camera. To his horror, the video showed Rachel being pulled into the shadows by an unseen force. Her screams echoed through the speakers. Desperate to survive, the group returned to the basement, hoping to find a way to stop the horrors. Samantha studied the journal again and pieced together the truth. Arthur Greaves had made a pact with a malevolent entity to keep the lodge prosperous. The price? Souls. "The lodge feeds on people," Samantha said. "Arthur sacrificed his guests to keep the entity satisfied. When he stopped, it consumed him too." "What do we do?" Chris asked. "The altar," Samantha said. "We have to destroy it." The group poured gasoline over the altar and lit it on fire. The flames roared to life, illuminating the room in a blinding light. The lodge screamed, a deep, guttural sound that shook the walls. As the fire consumed the altar, the entity revealed itself, a massive, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. It lunged at the group, but the flames drove it back. The lodge began to collapse. Chris and Ben pulled Samantha up the stairs as the basement caved in behind them. They burst through the front door, which was suddenly back in place, and ran into the forest as the lodge burned. Days later, authorities found no trace of the lodge, just an empty clearing where it once stood. Samantha, Chris, and Ben vowed never to speak of what they'd seen. But deep in the hollow woods, the faint outline of the lodge reappeared, waiting for its next visitors. Story number 3. The Crimson Manor. Perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, Crimson Manor had stood for over a century, its blood-red bricks weathered by time and the relentless sea wind. It had once been a lavish home to the wealthy Winslow family, but tragedy struck in 1902 when the family vanished during a stormy night. Since then, the manor had gained a sinister reputation, with rumors of ghostly sightings, strange lights, and screams echoing through the night. Locals called it the house that eats souls. Eager to revitalize the property, real estate mogul Peter Calloway purchased Crimson Manor to transform it into a luxury hotel. To document the restoration, he hired a film crew consisting of Alice, the producer, Jake, the cameraman, Danielle, the historian, and Max. Alice was optimistic. "This could be amazing for our careers. The history, the mystery. It's perfect." Danielle, the skeptic, wasn't so sure. Places like this don't just get a reputation for nothing. The group arrived at the manor on a crisp autumn afternoon. Its towering structure loomed over them, and the salty air carried a faint metallic tang. "This place is unreal," Jake said, already filming the exterior. "Let's hope it's not too real," Max muttered, eyeing the darkened windows. Inside, the manor was a mix of faded opulence and decay. Chandeliers hung by rusting chains, ornate rugs were eaten by moths, and portraits of the Winslow family stared down with hollow eyes. Danielle delved into her research while the others set up their equipment. She uncovered details about the Winslow family's final days. Mysterious illnesses, erratic behavior, and cryptic journal entries from Matilda Winslow, the family matriarch. One entry stood out. He speaks to us through the walls. He promises eternal life, but the price is steep. We cannot escape. Danielle read the passage aloud, and the group laughed nervously, except for Max, who thought he heard a faint whisper behind them. Just the wind, he muttered, though his unease lingered. That evening, as they explored the manor, they found a door in the basement sealed with heavy chains. It was covered in strange symbols, etched deep into the wood. This wasn't in the original blueprints, Danielle said, taking notes. Jake grinned. Looks like we found the Winslow's secret. Alice insisted they cut the chains for their documentary, but as Max struck the lock with a hammer, the entire house seemed to shudder. The door creaked open, revealing a spiral staircase descending into darkness. Let's check it out, Alice said, grabbing a flashlight. Max hesitated. Maybe we should wait until morning. Scared, Jake teased. No, Max lied, following reluctantly. The stairs led to an enormous chamber bathed in a faint red glow, as if the very walls were bleeding. At the center was a stone altar, surrounded by withered candles and what looked like human bones. What the hell is this? Jake asked, filming the scene. Danielle pointed to symbols carved into the altar. It's some kind of ritual site. These symbols, this is old magic. Sacrificial. Max backed away. We shouldn't be here. As they turned to leave, the door at the top of the stairs slammed shut, trapping them. The red glow intensified, and the air grew suffocatingly hot. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the chamber. You've come to finish what they started. Terrified, the group fled back upstairs, only to find the manor transformed. Hallways stretched endlessly, rooms shifted, and the once faded portraits now depicted grotesque, grinning faces. Danielle clutched Matilda Winslow's journal, frantically flipping through the pages. The Winslows made a deal with something evil. They wanted immortality, but it cursed them instead. What does that mean for us? Alice demanded. Danielle looked up, her face pale. It means we're part of the deal now. As if on cue, shadows began to form in the corners of the room, coalescing into twisted figures with glowing eyes. The group realized they needed to destroy the altar to break the curse. Armed with a crowbar and sheer desperation, they descended back into the basement, the shadows pursuing them relentlessly. The altar pulsed with a dark energy, and as Jake struck it, the guttural voice screamed, "You cannot undo what has been promised." The chamber erupted in chaos. The shadows attacked, slashing at the group with icy claws. Jake was dragged into the darkness, his screams echoing until they were abruptly silenced. Alice and Danielle continued to destroy the altar while Max held off the shadows with a burning torch. With one final blow, the altar cracked, releasing a blinding light. The manor began to collapse, the walls crumbling as the ground quaked. The survivors fled outside, watching as Crimson Manor was consumed by flames, its red bricks turning to ash. But their relief was short-lived. That night, Max and Alice both dreamed of the altar, and woke with strange marks etched into their skin. Danielle, now alone, found herself haunted by whispers wherever she went. Crimson Manor was gone, but its curse lived on. Weeks later, a new structure began to rise on the cliff, its blood-red bricks eerily familiar. The last entry in Matilda's journal echoed in Danielle's mind. It cannot be destroyed. It only begins again.